Hello and welcome to this exploring session, a first look at another two Lord Mayor's shows. This time we are looking at 1618 and 1619. It is the 29th day of October. It is almost always the 29th day of October here, unless that falls on a Sunday, in which case it will be the day after. Otherwise, we are looking at these two pageants. The first by our old favourite Anthony Munday, and the second by Thomas Middleton. So we have two established writers who are putting their mark on these two different pageants. For those who don't know about the Lord Mayor's show of the early modern period, it, broadly speaking, does a bit of a circuit round from the Guildhall. Everyone processes down to swear in the new Lord Mayor. They head down to the river, they get on barges, they go to Westminster, then they come back again, wander up to St Paul's, and then the main body of activity occurs on the road Cheapside on the way back to the Guildhall. We'll be throwing up on my screen here a rough map of the route for you to look at in the future. But we, as I say, we'll be going around the route at least twice tonight, so hopefully that will give you an idea of how it all fits together. The pageants frequently utilise the same sort of ideas, same certain kinds of standing properties get reused, but each livery company essentially commissions a new pageant each year from a different playwright, depending on who pitches the best and for the best terms. So we're going to be diving into 1618 first, and we'll see what that text brings up. The surviving texts are often quite confusing to decipher, and hopefully this room will help decipher it for you and give you a better idea of how it all fits together, including where all the gaps are. So reading with us today, I'll ask Greg if you could just introduce yourself, please.
I'm Greg, and I do like a good Monday of Monday.
He does. Greg is a real convert for civic pageantry and the Lord Mayor's show. Eric, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm sitting in the cave from rare love and fortune's triumph, or whatever, rare triumphs of love and fortune.
Yes, we were reading the Rare Triumphs of Love and Fortune earlier. There was a dark cave. Actually, I don't know if we got into the dark cave. I think it may be anticipatory for tomorrow. Rachel, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachel. Looking forward to another Lord Mayor's show.
Angela, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Angela. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a show. I want to be on one of those pageant things. I want to sit on the top.
And Stephen, introduce yourself.
I am Stephen. I am looking forward to a Lord Mayor's show. Soon you will be like us.
Oh, it's going to be one of those evenings, I can tell. And Tracey, introduce yourself, please. And more importantly, your friend.
I'm Tracey, and I'm a ventriloquist. This is my cat. Her name's Sludge.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I'll be assigning random paragraphs of text and occasional parts as we go along. So I'm going to ask Angela, could you just read the introductory bump, as it were, on the title page of the printing of this particular pageant, down to the printer and the date of printing, please?
Sidero-Thriambos, or Steel and Iron Triumphing, applauding the advancement of Sir Sebastian Harvey, Knight, to the dignity of Lord Mayor of London, taking his oath in the same authority at Westminster on Thursday, being the 29th day of October, 1618. Performed in hearty love to him and at the charges of his kind brethren, the right worshipful company of ironmongers. Devised and written by A.M., citizen and draper of London, London, printed by Nicholas Oakes, dwelling in Foster Lane, 1618.
So we have a new Lord Mayor coming in, and we've got the worshipful company of Ironmongers. Tracey, what can you tell us about Sir Sebastian Harvey and the Ironmongers? Muted at the moment.
Sorry. He wasn't desperately interesting, actually, unlike the next one. He was a member of one of the big families. His father was Lord Mayor in 1581, James Harvey, which is before the book started getting printed.
Excellent. And the Ironmongers, I'm assuming that there's a certain amount of ironmongery going on in that particular company. Do they have other tricks up their sleeves as well?
Not getting on very well with the founders, my company, or the pewterers, or anyone else who deals with metals, really. And what my favourite thing about the Ironmongers is their animal is the ostrich, and there is actually, of course, an ostrich in this particular show, as there is in the other ones later on.
Excellent. Okay, let's get into the text a little bit more. These texts tend to open with a certain amount of throat clearing and setting up before it starts describing the devices, the pageants that will be appearing, and then generally it sort of dances about a bit with the actual dialogue and things that might be said. So we may get descriptions of things that we will then later see. It depends how each individual printing is laid out. So I'm going to ask Greg, could you read the first paragraph coming up, please? And then Stephen, could you read the second?
To the master, yeah. Just to mention. Yeah. To the master, wardens, and hall assistant body, the Ironmongers, worshipful society. Gentlemen, I trust by you reposed in me. I hope you find to be faithfully performed on my behalf, in the despite of envy and calumnious imputations. What the whole scope of the devices aimed at and were ordered according to your direction are briefly set down in this book, which I dedicate the rather to your worships, because yours being the charge. What honour remaineth next to his for whom you intended this solemn day's triumph, ought in reason to return to you. And so, in discharge of mine own duty, I commend both myself and service to your favourable acceptation, your worships to be commanded.
This famous and most honourable city of London, having for many years had the royal preeminence to make choice of a chief magistrate by the title of Lord Mayor, and 2 sheriffs as his worthy assistants in office for the year's authority, under the highest and supreme power, enjoying the same by free voice and suffrages of public election in the Guildhall of London. Now, in this instant year, 1618, Sir Sebastian Harvey, knight and alderman of this noble city, and free of the right worshipful company of ironmongers, being chosen into that great and graceful dignity, his affectionate and kind brethren, according to ancient and precedent custom, observed to many more Lord Mayors of the same society, did thus tender their willing and hearty service to him upon the day of his inauguration, when, passing by barge with the other aldermen, his brethren, he went to take his oath at Westminster on Thursday, the 29th of October.
Yes, so that's the general throat clearing as to how this person's wonderful. This sort of thing happened on a Thursday. It's a Thursday, people. It's not Monday. It's Thursday. Any thoughts leaping out at that? There's not a lot of data there that we haven't necessarily mined elsewhere. It's all very general. Anything about the tone or the writing that interests you, Eric?
It's almost polite for Monday. He hasn't said anything like, and it was performed badly by these people, or like, sort of, there isn't anything like acerbic in there yet.
We maybe sometimes we're not fair on Monday.
Apart from envy and calumnious invitations.
Yeah.
But now I turn to liars, as father famously said. I don't know what's going on there.
So there's just a little hint of it. Other thoughts? No. We'll hold on to them for later if there are more. We now start getting some devices being described. So I'll ask Eric to read the first device, Rachel, if you could read the paragraph that follows, and then Angela, if you could read the paragraph after that, and then we'll probably briefly pause.
The first device presenting itself for his honor's service is an imaginary island termed Limnos, very ingeniously and artificially fitted, suitable to the day's solemnity, and because favorable conceit must needs supply the defect of impossible performance, especially in so slender a compass, that the isle itself be swallowed up in the appearance of a goodly mine, aptly seated in the midst thereof. Therein Mulciber, the god of mines and metals, especially such as consist of steel and iron, showeth his personal attendants with diverse of his one-eyed cyclops about him, forming from the mine's ore, gads of steel, bars of iron, and other such like matters out of the metals, for use of the ironmonger society, who are as lords and masters of the said mine, and therefore it is called the ironmonger's mine. These feigned cyclops, suited according to their service and diligence, each with his hammer busily employed while others attend the fire and bellows, are nimble and dexterous youths, such as the continual fall of their hammers in sweet musical voices and delicate variety of pleasing changes, do outwear their work merrily, as accounting no toil tedious, thus bestowed in the society's service, closing up every stanza with Acir Dure, the word or motto belonging to the company.
This isle or mine being seated quadrangle wise, at the four corners sit four beautiful nymphs or graces, being named Chrysos, Argurian, Calcos, and Sideros, figuring the four ages of the world, inhabited according to their true characters and natures, the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and the Brazen Age, having formerly triumphed, according to their several turns and times of eminency, do now give way to the Iron Age, wherein we live, to have her degree of sovereignty, as holding chief preeminence in this day's triumph. For she, being sole commandress in metals of most unusual employment, affordeth out of her bounteous mine all kinds of martial and military weapons, honoring with them arms and soldiers. Likewise, for tillage and husbandry, those instruments best agreeing therewith, because it is the sustentation of life and supporter of all other manuary trades, being not unmindful also of navigation and commerce with foreign nations, which can have no consistence but by her help.
Beside the company's crest of two lizards linked together with a golden terret, which in their coat of arms is placed in a chevron, stands fairly figured upon the mine. Above them all is Jupiter, mounted upon his royal eagle, with his three-forked thunderbolt in his hand, made in the Isle of Lemnos by Mulciber. He is also clad in a fair armour, intended for the service of Mars, but now bestowed on him as an honourable present by Mulciber, because he so graciously vouchsafed to be personally present in this triumph, as patron of all their pains and protector from foul-mouthed slander and detraction.
So before we just finish this little picture, so this is a device precisely where it's being used in the flow of events. It's probably happening, being used at Cheapside, but it may also appear earlier in the pageant day when it may appear at some point on the procession towards the barges at the beginning of the day. It's not unusual for them to start the day down there and then get unpacked while everybody goes off to Westminster. So we've got this island or mine. It's got four people sitting at the four corners. It's square. We're going to find out that it's drawn by creatures in a moment. So we have one of our presumably standard structures around which has been built this particular pageant device. Lots of references to the importance of the company's crest, its prominent place. We got Jupiter on top of an eagle. I'm quite interested about how this all looks. So and what what the popular idea of what a mine looked like in the early modern period was? I know a modern mine, or what I think a modern mine should look like. Is that the same then as it is today? Thoughts in the room? I've just been burbling. Other thoughts about this particular presentation so far? Angela?
Well, I'm first of all struck that this precise scene of all the people working in the way that company works is exactly the same as the ones that he did before for all the different liveries. So I remember all the goldsmiths were all working on things, and then all the drapers were working on things. So he obviously decided that this is very popular, and it'll work.
Yes, he's slightly changed the composition, but the basic idea is the same.
The basic idea is there, isn't it? So, and I wonder if a mine, because a mine, they don't do deep mines at this period, so you would get something which had a wooden frame and kind of went into a hill downwards, so it wouldn't be quite so difficult to do as later mines, maybe.
Well, if it's sort of a hillside and there's some sort of construction on it, and then you can have Jupiter held over that in some fashion. I'm really interested in the logistics of Jupiter on this eagle, and how that fits into the total landscape. Tracey, did you have something for us there? No. Other thoughts in the room, Eric?
What I found interesting was the bit about the song, and it's like sort of, you can kind of imagine them going yo ho ho, back to work and that kind of thing, and then but then it is recorded in sweet musical voices and delicate variety of pleasing changes. So they're basically, I don't know how much you would be able to hear over the banging of hammers, to be honest.
Well, I have to say, in my mind, I had the anvil chorus. Are the anvils, effectively musical instruments? Are they just, things that you can hit and that that they're playing musical instruments as well as singing? I don't know. I'm spitballing here.
I think Eric might be onto something there, because this year Munday gets into big trouble with the company for it was really poor. This year showed lots of complaints about it, and one of them was that the children were inaudible and badly rehearsed. Also, that the clothing that he'd been paid to supply was secondhand and a bit ropey. He got in big trouble about it, actually. They withheld some part of his fee. It went on for ages. So maybe there was it was a particularly kind of clanging kind of backdrop to these children singing sweet musically voices, and nobody could hear them.
Yeah. Oh no, that I like on a recreative sense of, if you're going to recreate this authentic moment in history, they have to sort of be quite bad. Not bad in the sense of badly performed, but the fact you shouldn't be able to hear anything that they're saying or singing. So that's a really interesting possibility. I like that. Other thoughts before we've got a little bit more detail of this device and accompanying business. Okay, we'll move forward. So we have... Oh, no, Rachel.
No, I was just wondering if there were any fireworks like that they would have, going off the Cyclops' thing, since they're supposed to be, hammering.
Oh, that's a good thought. Sparks. Producing sparks is very possible. So yeah, I like that very much. The other thing to remember is that these pageants, depending on what precise time they're playing, there's an awful lot of additional noise going on as well. There's a lot of banging. There's a lot of cannons being fired. There's guns going off all over the shop. And just the street being the street. So there's a lot of competition for any small singing children to play with without adding their own clanging to it. Stephen? Muted at the moment.
So this has probably already been dealt with, but I've missed those sessions. Wondering about what's implied by the word device. Munday devised it. But how much does device imply ingenuity or complexity, as opposed to just a picture, as it were?
Yeah, I like that. It's a very good question.
It's an excellent question, and I think it's the way that the term is used when it's being presented to the companies by the would-be producers. It's very much the latter. A device is like a conceit. It's the kind of the idea of the individual pageant device. Yeah, and I think they do the ingenuity involved. I mean, it's a word that's actually used quite a bit, especially when you get into Middleton's later ones. There's some amazing stuff going on in some of the late ones later in the 20s. And you kind of wonder how on earth they managed to realise this. So yeah, I think the companies appear to have been drawn towards something that looked incredibly impressive, technically impressive, even if it was actually something quite simple. If it looked good, then they would be quite keen to take that particular commission.
So the difference between something that's conceited and a device might be that a device is a physical thing, whereas conceited might just be
it's a physical realization of an idea. So the conceit, if you like, the idea underlying whichever device you want to kind of focus on, is then being realized by the craftsmanship of the artificer, who in this case I think was Robert Norman, without checking.
Okay, let's find out a little more data and go into some dialogue. So I'll ask Angela again to read the next paragraph, Rachel the paragraph after, and I've already queued up Eric and Greg to be master and mate. So we'll let that flow on. I'll read stage directions as appear in between.
The device is drawn by two goodly estridges, as being supporters of the society's arms, and therefore aptly alluded as guides to Mulciber's mine, befitting none other so well as that. For naturally they digest both steel and iron, as is avouched by many credible authors. One other military engine also, seeming to be forged in the same mine, is appointed to the second place, which is a fair and goodly cannon, strongly mounted upon her carriage, with all necessary furnishment for charging and discharging by her, as also divers chambers to be shot off as occasion serveth, and as the master gunner and his mate there present please to give direction or perform the service in their own persons.
Certain gallant knights in armor, well mounted on their coursers for service, and readily prepared with their petronels, have the charge or guiding of this cannon, besides a brave troop of musketeers. This was first employed on the water, in the morning's service, and afterward helpeth the day's further triumph.
So just a little note there saying when this business of this cannon occurred, it was earlier in the day, on the water, so lots of questions to ask about that. But we'll find out what the speeches between the master gunner and his mate at the cannon were.
Where are you, mate?
Here, sir, at hand to do what ye heard the master shall command.
This goodly cannon, forged for this day in Lemnos, where great Mulciber bears sway, he and his Cyclops, using all their skill to frame it in best form and for goodwill, they bear unto that ancient company, for whom their hammers walk continually, still to supply them from their plenteous mine with steel and iron, which as they refine from the earth's ore. So to all lands they send, and all arts else do bounteously befriend. Because where steel and iron go to rack, those lands do feel a lamentable lack. Now, mate, thou seest this is a jovial day, and every trade triumphs as best it may, by yearly custom, gladly to express their free affection in full cheerfulness. Be not we idle then, seeing to our charge this cannon is committed, but at large declare our diligence. Our gunner's art in this triumphal day must bear a part, full to thy pains.
Master, with all my heart, and no man shall deliver more than we, how much we honor this day's dignity. Yeah. First, then I'll sponge her as she ought to be, then laid her to report her lustily. Next, ram her. Now this bullet passeth in, which rammed again, louder report shall win. And shooting not point blank, but out at length, I'll mount her higher on her carriage strength. Now I have done, sir.
Then will I give fire, and may all speed no worse than we desire.
And I did miss to state the stage direction that as the mate is saying all this about loading this cannon and firing this cannon, all the business of cannonage is there are actions that go with it. I really just want to pause here and just talk about this cannon. I'm slightly confused as to where it's placed. One other military engine also seemed to be forged in the same, is appointed to the second place. Is this a second pageant thing, or is it just somewhere else on this main? Is it with one of the ostriches that are pulling the? Is it an armed ostrich? I'm slightly confused as to how all this literally functions. So is this on the same platform, or is this on a separate thing? Because it looks like it's a lovely bit of business about how this, what sort of cannon this is. Is it a proper cannon, or is it a fake artificial effect that is about to occur?
I think when he says second place, he means follow, is it? So it's the second in the procession. That's
right.
That's my expectation of that. And my thought about this actually was simply it can't have been made out of metal, because how would it made it float on the river? Would have been a struggle. So it's probably wood, painted wood, I'd imagine.
I don't know. You could put a cannon in. After all, you've got ships with masses of cannons in.
That's what I was going to say.
So you could put it on a boat if you've got it all sorted out. What I don't know how is you get it off the boat and back. And that's got to be a bit tricky.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I feel, or similarly, that it's a prop rather than a literal thing, that they can do lots of actions and it can be really big, so that people can see it. Whereas, the logistics of getting it on and off a barge, it's possible, but it's, I'd like to see that going horribly wrong and sinking to the bottom of the Thames. But yes, so we're saying this is essentially a separate item, second in the procession, and we may get more details about what else is in this procession later on. Other thoughts about that, master and mate? Did you enjoy your little? It's quite fun. It's very demonstrative. I mean, it's it goes with actions in the Navy. Anything else before we go on for more descriptive material of other devices? Eric?
Well, I don't see why the master would ask where the mate is, because it's already stated that he's next to him.
Comedy moment. It's for the audience. You remember, they've got to be heard.
He probably thought he wasn't actually writing something for the fortune and had to do like a cue.
Stephen, muted at the moment.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the context of martial and military weapons. So the ironmongers are kind of making a play for the significance of the craft. Does this link into wider shores than the City of London? In other words, how much are we getting allusions to what might be going on in fairly distant parts of the world at this point?
That's really interesting suggestion. I mean, you get a much stronger sense of the kind of continental warfare thing in Middleton shows in a couple of years' time, but things are all kicking off in Central Europe, aren't they, by 1618? So Munday's not one for sort of topical political commentary, generally speaking, and of course it is the ironmonger, so we had to do ironmongery stuff. But even so, I think there might be possibility there.
Yeah, I was wondering about the cannon on the water as well. This kind of the naval connections and/or commercial. Just a minute.
Yeah.
England's not at war. I mean, that's the whole point, that James I refuses to go to war.
Yeah, but a couple of years later,
16
Middleton's given him a really hard time for that.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So,
yeah. But in
yeah.
1618, I mean, like, so his daughter's just married Frederick of Bohemia. They've just been chucked out the Battle of the White Mountain, and he's doing absolutely nothing about it. So it's kind of quite interesting that the absolute absence of any of that from this is quite remarkable, really.
Okay, Eric, and then we'll move into some more text.
I was just going to mention the interesting random change in, well, I don't know if it's random, but there's a change in structure because like in previous pageants, we've always had the descriptions of each device first, and then we had the dialogue. Whereas now we've got this first device, then dialogue, then the next device, then dialogue. I don't know if that's like significant or not, but yeah.
Well, we don't have a lot of dialogue in this pageant, so the ordering of material is perhaps slightly more straightforward in that sense. Whereas with others, when you've got a lot of dialogue, and then how you actually fit that together, these documents are not always very tidy, it's an interesting question of how much dialogue there might have been originally. Is this actually an accurate representation of how much text was spoken? Or not. We've already had questions of complaints about not being able to hear things, so the question is, how much did they actually have to hear, is another question, of which this text may or may not give us more clues. I'm going to ask Stephen to read the next 3 relatively short paragraphs. I'll then ask Rachel to read from this day onwards, Eric to read expectation onwards, Greg to read wherein, and Angela now because fame, and hopefully that all makes sense and will work. Otherwise I'll prompt you to keep it all ticking over.
Next followeth a silver leopard, thickly bespotted with black pellets, bearing the crest of the Lord Mayor's arms. Upon the leopard rideth an ancient British bard, for bards were esteemed as poets or prophetical soothsayers, and in those reverend times held in no mean admiration and honour. He guideth the way to the Mount of Fame, being a pageant and aptly alluding to the other device, but in a more moral and significant manner, for therein is figured a model of London's happy government in that supreme dignity of the mayoralty, being a true type of that most sacred majesty, by whose gracious favour it is best supported, and borroweth from thence all beams of true light and splendour. In the most eminent place sitteth Fame, seeming as if she sounded her golden trumpet, the banner whereof is plentifully powdered with tongues, eyes, and ears, implying that all tongues should be silent, all eyes and ears wide open, when Fame filleth the world with her sacred memories.
This day she seemeth to present the new sworn Lord Mayor to sovereign majesty, whose lieutenant and lawful deputy he is now invested for London. She streweth him what other gracious personages she hath there attending her, for more honourable solemnity of this general triumph, presaging a happy and successful course to this year of government. By her is figured a goodly ship, whereby she conveys all beatitudes of kingdoms, cities, and nations to the furthest remote countries, intimating thereby how the magistrate may honour his prince, and that high trust and care committed to him, and supplying the state still with all needful occasions as by traffic and commerce are continually required.
Expectation, sitting somewhat lower on Fame's right hand, intimateth to him that there will be a more than ordinary matter to expect from him. In regard that he is now mounted like a beacon on a hill, to flame forth brightly and not to burn dimly, whereof Hope, sitting on the other side, seemeth to give a gracious persuasion. in regard that his worthy father did formerly supply the same place, and left such sensible instructions to his son, as cannot but edge his temper the more keenly, and quicken his spirits the more industriously. Because it is no common thing for a son to succeed his father in such eminency, and therefore bindeth him to the more serious observance.
Wherein, to encourage him the more, she showeth him all those sacred virtues that gave his father comfort in his magistracy, justice, and fortitude, who will as forwardly further him, treading down those vile incendiaries, ambition, treason, and hostility, which seek the subversion of all estates by bribing, corruption, and smoothing insinuation, or else by open fire and sword. But because this year may be the better secured against all these violences and treacherous attempts, they sit gyved and manacled together in iron shackles, purposefully made and sent from the ironmonger's mine to bind such base villains to their better behaviour.
Now, because fame cannot endure that any part of her mount should be unfitly furnished, in a degree more backward and somewhat lower than her seat sit her two sober sisters, Fear and Modesty, both veiled, but so sharp-sighted that they can discern through the darkest obscurities when any disorder threateneth danger to Majesty or to his careful deputy. When any such inconvenience happeneth, forthwith they inform vigilancy and providence sitting next to them, who hearing the alarm and striking clock in the castle, they awake Care, the sentinel, to ring the bell in the watchtower, which calleth up courage and counsel, that every one may have implement for safe preserving the mouth of fame.
So we got a little bit more data to come out of this. So this is seems to be that sort of wedding cake tiered wagon that we've had variously in the past. So you have a figure who is at the highest, and then you have various figures slightly lower down as you go. And so, yes, we've got fame at the top. We've got slightly below and to the left and the right. We've got expectation and hope. But then I always love it when it says backwards, somewhat lower. It's so that it's a three-dimensional thing. So there's presumably it's stated behind, but there's all sorts of ways of how these things are layered and placed. It's really interesting, and that question about how the treading down those vile incendiaries. But because this year may be better secured, they're also in chains. That's a nice little note and nod to the livery company here. Other thoughts before we read effectively the last gasp of the pageant, as it were, as we go into the last descriptors and the last speech.
Well, do you know what else was happening on the 29th of October 1618?
Off the top of my head, no.
Somebody very famous was being executed. It was Raleigh, yeah. Same day. They chose that day so that there wouldn't be crowds at the execution because they were all in the city, because he was executed at Westminster. And I've always thought that ambition and treason, they're not two kind of concepts that tend to come up in civil pageantry very much. And maybe, say Monday's not one for bringing in contemporary politics very much, but I'm kind of thinking that might have inflected it slightly. Certainly, the fact is that we do know that his execution was deliberately held on that date. It's kind of an interesting little moment there. It might be a nod there to Raleigh, and because ambition and treason are effectively what he was accused of. So,
liking that. Other thoughts before we move on? Eric, are you waving or drowning?
Both. I was trying to figure out who expectation was intimating details to, because because there's talk of expectation sitting on the right hand of fame, but then intimateth to him But then who does the him refer to? Is that the lieutenant and lawful deputy and stuff, or the or the Lord Mayor, or what?
Yeah, sometimes we get to an element of slightly fuzzy logic about how understandable the actions are, and also whether anyone in the audience would get them. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a very good question. We may get a little hint of additional data on that in the next paragraph, but I don't think there is actually necessarily a full answer to that. There may be, unless anyone else has found it. No.
I think it has to be the Lord Mayor, really.
That's what I was thinking, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm lost.
More than ordinary matter expected
Yeah.
from him.
I agree, though. It was really confusing. It was hard to work out who it was supposed to be talking to, because you think they're talking to Fame, who's a woman.
So expectation is pointing at the mayor in a pointed way or something along those lines. I say there's a few more little bits of data that the text will glean us before we get to the bard's final speech. And I think we'll let them run through. So I'll go Rachel next, then Greg, and then Stephen. Stephen's down to be bard.
For a better understanding the true morality of this device, the personages have all emblems of properties in their hands, and so near them that the weakest capacity may take knowledge of them, which course in such solemn triumphs hath always been allowed of best observation, both for avoiding trouble to the magistrate by tedious and impertinent speeches, and devouring the time which craveth diligent expedition.
Concerning our British bard, raised to be our speaker by sacred power of the Muses, he revolving over his ancient volumes concerning the course of times, findeth that in this year of 1618, the letter H shall have predominance in 3 distinct persons as eminent governors, and namely in the city of London, viz. The Lord Mayor and both the sheriffs. And if his predicting opinion doth not beguile itself, he saith that their names will be Harvey, Herne, and Harmersley, for the book of fate have concluded of them, against which can be no contradiction. Whereupon, making trial of his divination by his staff, which usually directed him in all such courses, as he speaketh to the Lord Mayor, he smiteth the staff upon his foot, and suddenly issueth forth the 3 several letters of H, apparently to be discerned of all. So finding his judgment to be fallen out true, and that the persons figured by those 3 letters are also there present, he proceedeth on in the rest of his speech, which according to the British garb, and then as he uttered it, here set down.
Yes, and here's the first speech of the bard in association. This Lord Mayor show is in association with the letter H. This is delivered to my Lord Mayor at his going to St. Paul's Church in the afternoon. So is this after all the events are over and he's returning from the Guildhall as he's going to St. Paul's Church in the afternoon? That sounds like that. Or is that when they're first getting off the boat and heading up? Don't know. Let's see if the speech gives a clue. Barders, please.
Blithe and bonny ben ye all, and mickle blessings still befall upon so fair and godly many, as thilke like ne saw I any. A British bard that long hath slept, and in his grave would still have kept, but that the spirit of poesy, which holdeth high sovereignty, hath raised me from my silent rest to make e'en in this jovial feast. Or for your sake, most worthy man, louting as lowly as I can, to crave your favour that I may for your society somewhat say, of thilke their buxom love to you, which they present but as your due, as often they have done before, to mickle of their brethren mere, among wha was your father one, which in this high charge did undergone. Oh, let me say it to your face, It is a sign of special grace, ye to supply your feathers place. In Psyche and Ensian famous city, under your king chief deputy. And let me tell ye a thing mair, of records have I read good steer, yet ne'er could find the like befair, as now hath happed. Thilk dignity of mayor and sheriff's authority, whilk London yearly grants to 3, ein letter H begins them all, and in so suit concordance 4, that Hervey, Herne, and Hammersley making a pleasing symphony. Ein anagram ilka name may bliss with honour, heal, and happiness. Honour to be sealed steff and stay, heal to uphold all eerie way, and happiness they to attend. Your year may have a happy end. Ye shoes and emblems to express main trouble ye with tediousness, and I, wha would na way offend, your kenning of them do commend, until thilk book whilk speaks them o'er, mere large than to my lot does fall. So, honour, heal, and happiness, give all your actions good success. At night at my lord's house. Thilk eye of day whilk graced our spot, being classed up maketh his resort, till under dwellers feeble night was gladly lengthen and delight. But standeth fearful of offending, because our joys mun have an ending. Not that we desire to leave ye, but for your own hame mun receive ye, and thereto making bold intrusion, was clays up all with rude confusion. Whilk fair, my laird, my perting is, wishing ye mickle years of bliss, that justice, zeal, and piety may shine in ye with majesty, that he wha puts ye in thilk trust may find ye rules so true and just, that after times may talk and say, when Hervey, Herne, and Hammersley, as mayor and sheriffs did bear sway, true honour, health, and happiness, thilk ye did their endeavours bless. Your brethren's love I mun command, to your acceptance say I end.
And that's all the text we get. I'm suspecting here that when the line "at night at my lord's house" is actually a stage direction, effectively that we have 2 speeches here rather than 1. It happens sometimes. But yes, that the bard, that would suggest definitely that the bard's first speech is on the return journey to St. Paul's after feasting at the Guildhall, and then we have a little return visit from the bard as they escort him back to his home. Several interesting things here. I like it when we get a few actions for this bard described there. I also quite like the slightly patronising bit of description about well, you know, we've made sure that they're all holding emblems that people can see really clearly, because you know some people don't understand what's going on. They need things decoded for them. Well, that's what I got from that. So just a little bit of source from Munday there. So I've counted 4 specific sort of devices, pageant wagons available that have been noted here. So we've got the massive island with the mine. We've got a military engine with a cannon on it. We've got a leopard, and we've got the Mount of Fame. I don't think I counted anything else that was additionally separate. I don't know about the bard. Raised to be our speaker is anything other than in a prominent place, but maybe had something to be standing on. But yes, we don't have an awful lot of data about what was said. We've only got, I say, 2 bits of dialogue / speeches. Thoughts before we close on this Anthony Munday text? Thoughts in the room, Rachel, Eric.
No, I was just gonna ask Tracey how many times the ironmongers have really been like for the Lord Mayor, and then also, does Anthony Munday not like them? Did the Drapers not get along with them either?
I get the sense they were a bit money conscious. They certainly made such a fuss about the shortcomings of this year's show and tried to get some of the money back. In terms of how many they had, relatively infrequent. The last one was Campbell in 1609, and the next one in 1629. So about every 10 years or so.
And we've
the thing I'm puzzling over is the Bard, actually, where that figure comes from. I was even seeing if it was anything to do with James's kind of policy about the unification of Britain that might have been happening in 1618 that would have explained it, but I can't see any reason why he would have suddenly launched into this kind of Old English, Scottish, strange hybrid speech.
It really is leaning even further into that sort of Middle English sort of ye oldies frame that we've had occasionally in the past, but nowhere near as all-encompassing. I mean, it's very, very good impression of earlier English forms. I have to say that it's quite well done in many ways. I mean, I'm not that it's necessarily a great speech, but Stephen. Sorry, Eric, then Stephen.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's interesting how there's no ghost, but then technically the Bard is the ghost. But then, I mean, because in previous pageants, Munday always goes, yeah, and this guy is the first ironmonger or fishmonger or whatever to serve as Lord Mayor, and we brought him here to give you advice and that kind of stuff. Whereas here, it's just like a bit bland.
Well, we don't know. For all we know, he does actually come out of the standby tombs the prop that we had in previous pageants. It's not impossible. There is no data from this as to how he appears or what he's with. Or I didn't notice any. I could be wrong. Stephen, then
he comes in on the leopard. He's riding on the leopard.
Oh, you're absolutely right. He's on the leopard. Leopard riding rideth an ancient British bard. Sorry, you're absolutely right. So we know exactly where he is. He's not coming out of a grave at all. He's doing what all bards do. They ride on leopards. I'm sorry. How did we miss this? It's just obvious. It's just obvious, isn't it?
It's
Steve?
old school, really. Old school, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, two things. One is early modern pronunciation. I really, really wished I could have had a stronger grasp of what a likely, as it were, standard early modern pronunciation was, because some of the features that we associate with, I don't know, Chaucerian English are still present to some extent, and it would be a very useful activity, I think, to just kind of cross-check some of the kind of sound cues there against perhaps an old-fashioned London speech, to which piece has anyone seen that YouTube video of somebody doing like 700 years of London accents? It's great.
Yeah. Isn't it David Christopher's son?
No, this is an amateur archaeologist who just really likes phonetics and phonology. The other point I wanted to make was Munday goes, well, nobody could possibly misinterpret this because of the hand props. I don't see that many hand props, and I don't see how much they would help me tell the difference between magistracy, justice, and fortitude. So how much of this is kind of after the fact going, no, it was just really simple, and how much of it is actually there is a kind of established iconography for the, vigilancy holds, I don't know, a flashlight or whatever it is, and everyone goes, oh, that's vigilancy, and we don't, you know what I mean? How much of this is special pleading?
Vigilancy has a bird to show that she is always alert.
Right, I missed that bit.
That's not from this one. That in other shows right. She pops up.
Okay, so he doesn't need to reinvent the wheel by saying, and we can tell who vigilancy is because that's that's sort of in place already.
I think it could be both, though. It could also be special pleading.
I was wondering,
because it's it's sort of what we expect. Briefly, other thoughts, Eric, Rachel, Greg.
I'm just wondering about how the bard smiteth the staff upon his foot and suddenly issueth forth the several letters of H and so on. Is that like he basically hits his foot and he like hits the staff against his foot and it explodes with letters? Is that the idea, or am I just misinterpreting it?
I don't know if you're I like it, but I don't know if you're misinterpreting that. I'll let people cogitate that thought. Rachel, then Greg.
No, I'm just thinking of the goldsmiths and the fishmongers and how there were things to throw out to people, passing by. Because I think from holding this pageantry that guarantees you an audience almost to be throwing things out to them. And there was something else, but I forgot it. I just noticed that because this was that seems to be missing here, that there's just not a lot of things they're giving out. And then also, I don't know if I missed it in the text, but did they invite people to come eat as much as they want? Because I don't remember seeing that.
Well, there doesn't seem to have been that, but we just don't have really any text. I mean, this is the thing, is that in terms of spoken text, I mean, that's why I'm leaning into the special pleading element of, going, well, they can all understand from the devices and think they don't need people talking, like maybe he didn't write as many speeches, and the ones that were there weren't clear enough, or, I mean, we don't know precisely because we have the text we have. Greg.
Rachel asked the question.
It doesn't seem anywhere near as interactive as some of the others we've done in the last few years that we've looked at. Certainly not as interactive as the really big ones that Decker and Middleton were doing a few years back, where huge amounts of activity going on. This again feels a bit stripped back, and maybe stripped it back too far. We do need to time travel, I'm afraid. So any final thoughts you want to throw in, hold it back to the end of the session, because we're going to go to the triumphs of love and antiquity, an honourable solemnity performed through the city at the confirmation and establishment of the Right Honourable Sir William Cockayne, Knight in the office of His Majesty's Lieutenant, the Lord Mayor of the famous City of London, beginning in the morning at his lordship's going and perfecting itself after his return from receiving the oath of mayoralty at Westminster on the morrow after Simon and Jude's Day, October the 29th, 1619, by Thomas Middleton, gent, still printed by Nicholas Oakes. So, with this new year, 1619, we have Sir William Cockayne. And what do we know about him and his livery company, for that matter?
But Cockayne is really quite a significant figure. He's already kind of come up in conversation because, of course, he was the man who proposed what's known as the Cockayne Project, to export undressed wool, to ostensibly save the English wool trade, which it did the reverse, actually. So he was a very important figure, big player, very kind of well-known at court. But Middleton appears to have really liked him because he wrote Middleton became the city chronologer the following year, and he wrote some really quite heartfelt verses about Cockayne's at his end of his term, at the end of 1620. So, yeah, so he's an important man. And going back to what we were saying about the military stuff in the previous year, as the title of the page says, Cockayne was also Lord General of the military forces. So the militarism of London is starting to really ramp up in 1619. And Middleton being Middleton, he actually talks about it really directly as well.
And so this is the Skinners. What are they like as a company?
Skint. No, genuinely, they very rarely have any money.
But for the audience at home, what is their primary trade?
Well, they deal in pelts, which is why you'll get references to kind of strange animals from places like Russia and stuff. So they deal in kind of, rare wool, fur and things like that.
Excellent. Okay, this text is I think a slight, until we get to a certain section, which we may discuss about precisely how we read, is slightly more straightforward. I think it's slightly more easier to read. So I'll ask Angela, actually, if you can read the sort of opening dedicatory notes and the first chunk of paragraph text, if foreign nations, and we'll just read that, Angela, please, and then we'll briefly pause before we go into some dialogue, description, dialogue sort of process.
To the honour of him to whom the noble fraternity of Skinners, his worthy brothers, have dedicated their loves in costly triumphs, the Right Honourable Sir William Cockayne, Knight, Lord Mayor of this renowned city, and Lord General of his military forces. Love, triumph, honour, all the glorious graces this day holds in her gift, fixed eyes and faces, apply themselves in joy all to your look, in duty then, my service and the book. At your lordship's command, Thomas Middleton. If foreign nations have been struck with admiration at the form, state, and splendour of some yearly triumphs, wherein art hath been but weakly imitated and most beggarly worded, there is fair hope that things where invention flourishes, clear art and her graceful properties, should receive favour and encouragement from the content of the spectator, which, next to the service of his honour and honourable society, is the principal reward it looks for, and not despairing of that common favour which is often cast upon the undeserver through the distress and misery of judgment, this takes delight to present itself.
Yes, once again, just a little hint of the Tiggerish quality to Middleton that we had in a previous text, but also possibly shade. Is there a sort of hint to this is for the people to enjoy, and if it doesn't go down well, I'm here to please that audience as well as the Lord Mayor, and maybe a little snub at the previous years. Am I reading too much into that, or is that just a is somebody else throwing shade rather than Munday?
I think it's possible, but it might also be a kind of, like when you employ a plumber and the plumber comes around and goes, "Oh, I wouldn't have done it like that." It's kind of casting aspersions on competitors for the business. So, yeah, it's Middleton does it quite a lot. It may or may not be directed at Munday.
Just the general state of affairs.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go into the pageant itself, and I say we're going to get fairly quickly into the pageant. And for this one, I will actually bring up my my little map to give us an idea, because we're going to start at the waters, as it were. This is the procession starts at the Guildhall and makes its way down in the morning to the water's edge. I'll just bring up my little map. So heading down to Three Cranes, and there is something that occurs there. So I'll ask Angela. No, I've just asked Angela. I will ask Greg to read the speech of love in just a moment, and I'll just read this moment, this little bit of direction here. And first, to begin early with the love of the city to his lordship, let me draw your attentions to his honour's entertainment upon the water, where expectation big with the joy of the day, but beholding to free love of language and expression, thus salutes the great master of the day and triumph, and follows the speech to entertain his lordship upon the water.
Honour and joy double their blessings on thee. I, the day's love, the city's general love, salute thee in the sweetness of content. All that behold me worthily may see how full mine eye stands of the joy of thee. The more because I may with confidence say, desert and love will be well matched today. And herein the greatest pity will appear. This match can last no longer than a year. Yet lot not that discourage thy good ways. Men's loves will last to crown the end of days. If those should fail, which cannot easily die, thy good works wed thee to eternity. Let not the shortness then of time dismay the largeness of thy worth. Gain every day so many years thou gainst, but some have lost, for they that think their care is at great cost. If they do any good in time so small, they make their year but a poor day and all. For as a learned man will comprehend in compass of his hour, doctrine so sound, which give another whole year to mend, he shall not equal upon any ground. So the judicious, when he comes to bear this powerful office, struck with divine fear, collects his spirits, redeems his hours with care, thinks of his charge and oath what ties they are, and with a virtuous resolution then works more good in 1 year than some in 10. Nor is this spoken any to detract, but all to encourage to put truth in act. Methinks I see oppression hang the head, falsehood and injury with their guilt struck dead. At this triumphant hour, it all causes hide their leprous faces, daring not to abide the brightness of this day. And in mine ear, methinks the graces silver chimes I hear. Good wishes are at work now in each heart. Throughout this sphere of brotherhood play their part. Chiefly thy noble own fraternity, as near in heart as they've been placed, as near in heart as they're in place to thee. The ensigns of whose love bounty displays, yet esteems all their cost sure to thy praise. There will appear elected sons of war, which this fair city boasts for their care. Strength and experience set in truth of heart, all great and glorious masters in that art which gives to man his dignity, name, and seal, prepared to speak love in a noble peal. Knowing 2 triumphs must on this day dwell, for magistrate 1, and for coronel, return Lord General, that's the name of state. The soldier gives thee, peace the magistrate. On then, great hope, here that good care begins, which now earth's love and heaven's hereafter wins.
So that's at the beginning of the day. So they've travelled down from the Guildhall, they've gone onto the boats on the water, cannons fire, boats make their way to Westminster, and then they come back again. And I'll ask Stephen if you could read the bit of prose explaining what happens when they return from Westminster and precisely where they are light, slightly south of St. Paul's.
As his lordship's return from Westminster, those worthy gentlemen whose loves and worths were prepared before in the conclusion of the former speech by water, are now all ready to salute their Lord General with a noble volley at his lordship's landing, and in the best and most commendable form, answerable to the nobleness of their free love and service, take their march before his lordship, who being so honourably conducted, meets the first triumph by land, waiting his lordship's most wished arrival in St. Paul's churchyard, near Paul's Chain, which is a wilderness, most gratefully and artfully furnished with divers kinds of beasts bearing fur, proper to the fraternity. The presenter, the musical Orpheus, great master both in poesy and harmony, who by his excellent music drew after him wild beasts, woods, and mountains. Over his head an artificial cock, often made to crow and flutter with his wings. This Orpheus, at the approach of his lordship, gives life to these words.
So gets off the boat and there's a massive bang volley. Always nice or getting on the boat, getting off the boat there. And then he encounters the first triumph by land. So we have this triumph here. Orpheus is on it. There's all sorts of wild beasts. Eric, would you please read Orpheus?
Great Lord, example is the crystal glass by which wise magistracy sets his face, fits all his actions to their comeliest dress, for there he sees honour and seemliness. 'Tis not like flattering glasses, those false books made to set age back in great courtiers' looks, like clocks on revelling nights that ne'er go right, because the sports may yield more full delight, but when they break off, then they find it late. The time in truth appears, such is their state, whose death by flatteries is set back a while, but meets them in the midst of their safe smile. Such horrors these forgetful things mend, that only mind their ends, but not their end. Leave them to their false trust. List thou to me, thy power is great, so let thy virtues be. Thy care, thy watchfulness, which are but things remembered to thy praise. From thence it springs, and not from fear of any want in thee, for in this truth I may be comely free. Never was man advanced, yet waited on with a more noble expectation. That's a great work to perfect, and as those that have art in art a mastery can oppose all comers and come off with learned fame, yet think not scorn till still of a scholar's name, a title which they had in ignorant youth, so that he that deals in such a weight of truth as the execution of a magistrate's place, though never so exact in form and grace, both from his own worth and man's free applaud, may yet be called a laborer in the cause, and be thought good to be so in true care, the labor being so glorious, just, and fair. Behold then, in a rough example here, the rude and thorny ways thy care must clear. Such are the vices in a city sprung, as are yon thickets that grow close and strong. Such is oppression, costage, bribes, false hires, as are yon catching and entangling briars. Such is gout justice, that's delay in right, demurs and sweets that are as clear as light. Just such a wilderness is a commonwealth that is undressed, unpruned, wild in her health. And the rude multitude, the beasts of the wood, that know no laws, but only will and blood. And yet by fair example, musical grace, harmonious government of the man in place, of fair integrity and wisdom framed, they stand as mine do, ravished, charmed, and famed. Every wise magistrate that governs thus may well be called a powerful Orpheus. Beyond yon bird of state, the vigilant cock, the morning's herald and the ploughman's clock, at whose shrill crow the very lion trembles, the sturdiest prey taker that here assembles. How fitly does it match your name and power, fixed in that name now by this glorious hour. At your just voice shake the boldest offensive and sturdiest the boldest offense and sturdiest sin. The air had residence, insecure man, yet with an equal eye, matching grave justice with fair clemency. It being the property he chiefly chose to give wing warning still before he crows, to crow before he strike by his clapped wing, to stir himself up first, which needful thing is every man's first duty by his crow, a gentle call or warning which should flow from every magistrate. Before he extend the stroke of justice, he should reprehend, and try the virtue of a powerful word. If that prevail not, then the spur, then the sword. See, herein honors to his majesty are not forgotten when I turn and see the several countries in those places plain, all owing fealty to the sovereign. The noble English, the fair thriving Scot, plain-hearted Welsh, the Frenchman bold and hot, the civilly instructed Irishman, and that kind savage, the Virginian, all lovingly assembled, e'en by fate, this day's honor to congratulate. On then, and as your service fills this place, so through the city do his lordship grace.
And yes, so we have this triumph with Orpheus and his artificial cock. It's an interesting thing there. That's at the meets the Lord Mayor by the waterside. It's going to be heading up to St Paul's Churchyard in just a moment. Thoughts about both the speech before he gets, or as he gets onto the boat, and the speech for when he gets off the boat. Thoughts about all of those things. Thoughts in the room. Rachel.
I just think it's interesting that this man who was actually a soldier, his is so less militaristic than the preceding mayor. And I also really like the line, the soldier gives the peace, the magistrate, and it shows this sort of, transition of this Lord Mayor himself from one occupation to the next, and also like attributes that both of them are people who bring peace in different ways for a country.
Other thoughts? Orpheus, I'm very interested in this artificial cock. It has to be said. There's nice to made to crow and flutter with his wings, and Orpheus does refer to it. So there is interaction between the device there and the actor. Angela.
I mean, two things. One is I was wondering if the cock is there because he it's another one of those using somebody's name to do things. The other thing I was just going to say about the horses or the soldiery is this the civil bands of London that he's the general of? It's not. There's no standing army, is there? So is this who he's in charge of?
Yes, the trained bands, London militia.
Yes, and I think the wordplay is absolutely we've had going back a few decades. Play at the web. The various plays playing on various Lord Mayor's names is yes, it seems to be a thing. People like their puns. Other thoughts? Eric.
There was a lot of repetition in Orpheus's speech, and I'm not just saying not in terms of concepts, but just sort of when you get to the crow and cock and flow, but it just before he crows, to crow before he strike by his clap wing, and it just feels very sort of emphatic, kind of, in a way.
It is markedly different to Middleton's earlier work, actually. It seems that this is slightly more designed for street. For that repetition is quite important, I think, for making sure that things are being communicated. Sometimes you need to say things more than once. Stephen. Muted at present.
Well, we were talking about Britishness, weren't we? And there's this kind of list, which has got sort of random French in there from Orpheus: noble English, plain-hearted Welsh, Frenchman, civilly instructed, Irishman, and the kind savage, the Virginian. So what? This isn't British, is it? Or it's not Munday British. Munday's going the sort of King Lear with an eye route, isn't he? And this sort of ancient kingdom thing. But what is going on with this list of nations?
Does England still lay claim to France or parts of France by 1618, 19? That seems to be the only kind of
for centuries.
Have they stopped?
Though it is.
Maybe it's Guernsey or something. I just wondered. I think it's interesting that if we are talking about the same thing, that Munday approaches it from one angle, and Middleton is giving it a sort of what seems to be a kind of contemporary sweep here. It can't be coincidence that if you are talking about Orpheus, that he chooses these particular examples, surely.
I think there's a kind of a chain of association here, because Cocaine's coat of arms was 3 cockerels, and it might be that Middleton's kind of thinking of the most kind of harmonious, pleasant sounding bird, and associating that with Orpheus, and it's a bit kind of far-fetched, but that seems to be where it comes from.
Right.
Okay, let's get to the main body of the show, as it were. I'll ask Stephen to read the next paragraph. Rachel, if you could be example. Greg, if you could read the next two paragraphs following, and then Angela, if you could be Antiquity in the Parliament of Honour. Please. So, Stephen, Rachel, Greg, Angela, and then we'll pause. So they've got off the boat, they've met Orpheus, they're heading up to Paul's churchyard.
At which words, this part of Triumph moves onwards and meets the full body of the show in the other Paul's churchyard, then dispersing itself according to the ordering of the speeches following. One part, which is the sanctuary of fame, plants itself near the little conduit in Cheap. Another, which hath the title The Parliament of Honour, at St. Lawrence Lane End, upon the battlements of that beauteous sanctuary, adorned with 26 bright burning lamps, having allusion to the 26 aldermen, they being for their justice, government, and example, the lights of the city. A grave personage crowned with the title and inscription of Example breathes forth these sounds.
From that rough wilderness, which did late present the perplexed state and cares of government, which every painful magistrate must meet, here the reward stands for thee, a chief seat, in fame's fair sanctuary, where some of old, crowned with their troubles now, are here enrolled in memory's sacred sweetness to all ages, and so much the world's voice of thee presages, and these sit for many, with their graces, fresh as the buds of roses, though they sleep, in thy society had once high places, which in their good works for they forever keep. Life called them in their time, honors, fair stars, large benefactors, and sweet governors. If here were not sufficient grace for merit, next object, I presume, will raise thy spirit.
In the masterpiece of art, fame's illustrious sanctuary, the memory of those worthies shine gloriously that have been both Lord Mayors of this city and noble benefactors and brothers of this worthy fraternity, to wit, Sir Henry Barton, Sir William Gregory, Sir Stephen Jennings, Sir Thomas Murphan, Sir Andrew Judd, Sir Wollstone Dix, Sir Stephen Slanier, Sir Richard Saltonstall, and now the Right Honourable Sir William Cockayne. That Sir Henry Barton, an honour to memory, was the first that for the safety of travellers and strangers by night through the city caused lights to be hung out from All-Hallowtide to Candlemas. Therefore, in this sanctuary of fame, where the beauty of good actions shine, he is the most properly and worthily recorded. His lordship by this time gracefully conducted toward that Parliament of Honour near St. Lawrence Lane End, Antiquity from its eminence thus gloriously salutes him.
Grave city governor, so much honour do me, vouchsafe thy presence and thy patience to me, and I'll reward that virtue with a story that shall to thy fraternity and glory. Then to thy worth no mean part will arise, that art ordained chief for that glorious prize. 'Tis I that keep all the records of fame, mother of truths, Antiquity my name. No year, month, day, or hour that brings in place good works and noble for the city's grace, but I record, that after times may see what former were and how they ought to be, fruitful and thankful in fair actions flowing, to meet heaven's blessings, to which much is owing. For instance, let all grateful eyes be placed upon this mount of royalty, by kings graced, queens, prince, dukes, nobles, more by numbering gained than can be in this narrow sphere contained. 7 kings, 5 queens, only 1 prince alone, 8 dukes, 2 earls, Plantagenets 21. All of this fraternity made free, brothers and sisters of this company, and see with what propriety the fates have to this noble brotherhood knit such states. For what society the whole city brings can with such ornaments adorn their kings, their only robes of state, when they consent to ride most glorious to high parliament, and mark in their royal intent still, for when it pleased the goodness of their will to put the richest robes of their loves on to the whole city, the most ever came to this society, which records here prove, adorning their adorners with their love, which was a kingly equity. Be careful then, great lord, to bring forth deeds to match that honour from hence proceeds.
And Eric, could you read the next paragraph, please, before we pause?
At the close of which speech, the whole triumph takes the leave of his lordship. For that time, until after the feast of Guildhall rests from service. His lordship, accompanied with many noble personages, the honourable fellowship of ancient magistrates and aldermen of the city, two new sheriffs, the one of his own fraternity, the complete brotherhood of Skinners, the right worshipful Master Sheriff Dean, a very bountiful and worthy citizen, not forgetting the noble pains and loves of the heroic captains of the city and gentlemen of the artillery garden, making with 2 glorious ranks a manly and majestic passage for their Lord General, his lordship, thorough Guildhall Yard, and afterward their loves to his lordship resounding in a second noble volley.
Bang. So yes, we've got these 2 additional pageants here. We've got one at the Little Conduit, and we've got the other at the other end of the road, slightly beyond the standard there. You don't have on the map St. Lawrence Lane, but it's around about there. So at the first, I think example was with the first Little Conduit, it was a little unclear. It seemed like example might have been at the second one, the way it was laid out, but I think it must be for the first one at the Little Conduit, and then Antiquity definitely speaking in the Parliament of Honour. So we have these 2, the Sanctuary of Fame, and we got the Parliament of Honour, both of which present speeches before everybody processes in various orders to the feast at Guildhall and have a lovely time, I am sure. Thoughts about Antiquity example? Is this are there sort of pictures of the Lord Mayor with the Sanctuary of Fame? Is that effectively what that is? It seemed to be what I was getting from that. The masterpiece of our fame's illustrious sanctuary, the memory of those worthies shine gloriously. And there's a long list of names, but I don't know if they're represented in some fashion.
They may have been coats of arms, scutcheons. These are, we saw those with the Munday show 1616, where Walworth is surrounded by these emblems of the previous dignitaries. So that's probably what it is. This one of Middleton's reminds me so much more of Munday, having the kind of account of the previous famous Lord Mayors and the number of members of the royal family and aristocrats who joined the company and so on. It's much more interesting history than Middleton's shows tend to be, this one. It's interesting.
Yes, and we're about to hit dive at well, I say dive at, maybe dance around a bit of the text now that is about to go into history on, shall we say, a deep dive, which we may or may not read. We may skip ahead. I'll see what the feeling of the room is. But yes, anything more about Antiquity and example and these 2 particular things that attach themselves, as it were, to the Little Conduit and set themselves up at the other end, St. Lawrence Lane end of Cheapside. Eric.
Well, while I was reading the whole part about, the heroic captains of the city and the gentlemen of the artillery garden, my brain just went, and the brave apprentices of London. which of course is from a play that we've done.
Yes, Edward IV, parts 1 and 2. Highly recommended, rather fun. Yes, other thoughts? Okay.
I like that the main thing that the Skinners have got to say is that, of course, they're everybody wears their ermine robes and their various different kind of skins, don't they? That's I suppose that's what he's going on about, but he's kind of a little bit coy about it. He doesn't really say they wear skins. I just find the whole thing a bit obscure compared to Munday, who's extremely clear about what's being said, it seems to me.
I really like the visual image of the sanctuary, the 26 burning lamps, and then these kind of the image of the light is being picked up on by the succeeding couple of speeches. Given that if it was when they were on their way back to St. Paul's after the feast, it probably would have been dark by then, so it would have had a really lovely effect.
Yes, because that's the element. Of course, these pageants are sitting around for the day, that they have a slightly different sense of what they're doing at different times of the day as well. So yes, even more effective the darker it gets, and on a cold October day, it gets dark early. Okay, so we have now. I'll just briefly read you the intro before I suggest we skip, but I'll see what the room says. Now that all the honours before mentioned in that Parliament or Mount of Royalty may arrive at a clear and perfect manifestation, to prevent the over-curious and inquisitive spirit, the names and times of those kings, queens, prince, dukes, and nobles free of the honourable fraternity of Skinners in London shall here receive their proper illustrations. And now we have a lengthy list of kings, associates through history, starting in 1329 and jumping forward up to the present day. Anyone desperate to read all of that? For the viewers at home, you can go to the map, our London website. There's a link in the show notes that has these texts, most of these texts available. You can go and read this if you would like. It is available. Link is available in the show notes. I think whatever we will do, we will skip to the very close after the royal sum. 7 kings, 5 queens, 1 prince, 7 dukes, 1 earl, 21 Plantagenets, 7 kings, 5 queens, 1 prince, 8 dukes, 2 earls, 1 lord, 24 skinners, and a partridge in a pear tree. So we get 2 more bits of data about the pageant day itself. So everything's marched along Cheapside. Everyone's gone to the Guildhall. Guildhall feasting is occurring, and now the Lord Mayor is going to head back towards St. Paul's and eventually is going to make his way home. We have a bit more description and a final speech. So Greg, you're still Love. You were Love earlier, so you're still Love. And Angela, could you read the last bit of prose, please?
The feast ended at Guildhall. His lordship, as yearly custom invites it, goes accompanied with the triumph before him towards St. Paul's, to perform the noble and reverend ceremonies which divine Antiquity religiously ordained, and is no less than faithfully observed. Holy service and ceremonies accomplished, his lordship returns by torchlight to his own house, the whole triumph placed in comely and decent order before him, the wilderness, the sanctuary of fame adorned with lights, and the parliament of honour, and the triumphant chariot of love with his graceful concomitants, the chariot drawn with 2 luzarnes, near to the entrance of his lordship's gate. Love, prepared with his welcome, thus salutes him.
I was the first, grave lord, that welcomed thee to this day's honour, and I spake it free, just as in every heart I found it placed, and 'tis my turn again now to speak last. For love is circular, like the bright sun, and takes delight to end where it begun, though indeed never ending in true will, but rather may be said beginning still. As all great works are of celestial birth, of which love is the chief in heaven and earth. To what blessed state then are thy fortunes come, since that both brought thee forth and brings thee home? Now, as in common course which clear things best, there's no free gift but looks for thanks at least. A love so bountiful, so free, so good, from the whole city, from thy brotherhood, that name I ought a while to dwell upon, expect some fair requital from the man they've also largely honoured. What's desired? That which in conscience ought to be required. O thank him in thy justice, in thy care, zeal to right wrongs, works that are clear and fair, and will become thy soul, whence virtue springs, as those rich ornaments thy brother kings. And since we cannot separate love and care, for where care is, a love must needs be there, and care where love is, 'tis the man and wife through every estate that's fixed in life. You are by this city's bridegroom proved, and she stands wedded to her best beloved. Then be, according to your mourning vows, a careful husband to a loving spouse, and heaven give you great joy, both it and thee, and to all those that shall match after you.
The names of those beasts bearing fur and now in use with the bountiful society of skinners, the most of which presented in the wilderness where Orpheus predominates. And I don't know if this is love's speech continuing, or by mentioning Orpheus, this should be said by Orpheus. I do not know. But we'll say love continues.
Ermine, foin, sables, martin, badger, bear, luzerne, budge, otter, hipponess and hare, lamb, wolf, fox, leopard, mink, stoat, minerva, raccoon, morsey, wolverine, caliber, squirrel, mole, cat, musk, civet, wild and tame, coney, white, yellow, black must have a name. The ounce, rose grey, Ginnet, Papillon, of birds the vulture, bitter, ostrich, swan, some worn for ornament and some for health, all to the skinner's art bring fame and wealth.
It feels like actually Orpheus could have done that. Orpheus was the one with all the animals around him, so maybe. So in recompense, Eric, having lost a potential Orpheus lines, if you could read the final descripture that exists.
The service being thus faithfully performed, both to his lordship's honour and to the credit and content of his most generously bountiful society, the season commends all to silence, yet not without a little leave taken to reward art with the comely dues that come unto it, which hath been so richly expressed in the body of the triumph, with all the proper beauties of workmanship, that the city may, without injury to judgment, call it the masterpiece of her triumphs. The credit of which workmanship I must justly lay upon the deserts of Master Garrett Christmas and Master Robert Norman, joint partners in the performance.
So yes, once again, important credits to the artificers at the end. Yes, do we know anything about Master Garrett Christmas and Master Robert Norman at all, or are they just names in the wilderness?
Christmas is really significant figure. He's one of the most highly regarded carvers of the period. He did some work for King Charles, did a number of big tombs, various very important rich people. So he's the kind of top guy, actually. Norman worked with Munday, so he was very experienced. Christmas, this is the first one Christmas was involved in, so I imagine that Norman was asked to kind of basically give him a bit of mentoring. But by the time you get to the later 1620s and early 30s, Christmas is well au fait with it. But yeah, he wouldn't have come cheap.
So yes, we've got just an additional note that the Chariot of Love is being pulled by two Lazarns, two lynxes, so two big cats. We haven't seen them for a while, or have we? I can't remember. I haven't made proper notes of when specific animals appear. Yeah, and when we have a whole Noah's Ark of squirrels and moles and stuff. And the ostrich, of course, mentioned there, spelt as estrige, as is the custom of the time. So yes, it's in a sense it's not that complicated a pageant. I mean, obviously the individual pageants are, there's an automated cock, and there are, obviously very well adorned wagons, but there are a few speeches. But we haven't had that sort of ridiculous interactive display that we had earlier in the decade, where we were having things thrown at the audience and games effectively being played with people throughout. This seems a much more straightforward presentation. I don't know, am I misreading it there? Thoughts from the room about these two pageants? We can open it out not only to this one but also to the earlier Monday that we looked at the beginning of the session. Thoughts about just these different aesthetics? Angela?
So can I just ask, with that long list of names of all the different princes, dukes and everything, are we saying that what you've actually got is a long procession of people dressed up as those characters, so that whereas Munday tends to put everything in a pile, on a big pyramid, what Middleton is doing is like spreading them all along, and then they can all walk along, which makes life a lot simpler, I must say. But
I don't think they would have been there. I can't remember which year it was, but there is certainly precedent for the company being presented with the scroll containing the names of all the eminent members of the company from the past, which it was the Merchant Tale in 1607, which was then transcribed into the company minutes. I think this is what's happened here. I think this is just something that Middleton was asked by the company to include in the book or something. I mean, I haven't had a chance to check where its provenance. I wouldn't be at all surprised if something's not straight out of stone. He's probably done a bit of cutting and pasting. But yeah, I don't think.
How disappointing!
No. Sorry.
There might, Antiquity on the Parliament of Honour refers to in the speech, queens, prince, dukes, nobles, etc. And we don't actually really have any description of what that pageant looks like, I think, in the text particularly. We get a relatively large amount of data on the Parliament, a Sanctuary of Fame, but we don't really get that much detail. So it might be that some of them are personated, and then we get, but all of the stuff that we skipped and we didn't read just feels like, the footnotes that inspired, but we don't really have any. There was no intention of giving all that data, and that Middleton knows there was no intention of actually displaying all that data. It's just, there are lots of kings we've been associated with. We've got lots of royalty.
I think some of it's quite funny. You get kind of Middleton's Calvinism coming through. He talks about Queen introducing the innovation of riding side saddle. Queen Anne. His modesty then may make this age blush now, she being the first that taught women to ride sidling on horseback. But who it was that taught them to ride straddling, there is no record so immodest that can show me only the impudent time and the open profession.
Yes, which I think is stuff that gets touched on in Thomas of Woodstock as well. That whole thing about the riding side saddle thing is there, though not the immodest question that he proposes. Other questions, thoughts, comments? How was it being loved, Greg? Being drawn being drawn by your two big cats.
Yes. I just wish they were the ones that were on screen at the time, almost. It's like.
I did like Rachel demonstrating what a cat was when cats were referenced. I thought that was a very nice moment, actually.
I am not a cat. I'm hasty child. Yes.
I'm slightly disappointed that I didn't have a squirrel next to me at the time. I normally do, but today I don't. So if I'd thought about this ahead, I would have had a whole series of cuddly toys just coming up during that probably bit by Orpheus.
The first one of these didn't really excite me. And I think just because there's not much of it, and I think actually if we had more of the text, it would probably make me probably a bit more excited by it. But I really like this one with the Orpheus, and as we've said before, the government, the Parliament idea and everything else. Yeah, no, really interesting as usual. Love hearing all the historical fact, having looked at them in a very dry sense.
Well, it's quite different from, you know, when we're looking back at 1612, 1613, when we have a huge amount of data about how they, coming from the text as printed, and then everything seems to take a slight step backwards again in terms of the amount. And I'm just wondering if there's a size of you know, how much they're willing to actually print, how many pages issue going on here, and we're only getting partial data because of that, or whether that's just what the pageant is like, and they spent a lot of money and they wanted to, and it all got a bit out of hand and a bit unmanageable, because sometimes big events can grow in ways that you just go, no, maybe we should stop doing all the things and get back to the basics. So I don't know if I'm just spitballing nonsense there or not, but it was just, we got something very dynamic earlier in the decade that doesn't seem to have been replicated anywhere near as much.
I think the triumphs of truth, if that's kind of partly what you're referring to, is there's nothing else like it, because I think it's just simply too long. You know, to kind of dramaturgically very interesting for people like us, but not necessarily going to work for a bunch of people who aren't really that interested in seeing this great long play, you know, work its way through to its denouement. I mean, I like this one actually. I think as I say, you know, the sanctuary with the lights in it is a lovely image. There are some kind of nice moments in there. Middleton's just really getting into his stride now. This is only the second one he's done on his own.
Well, yes, and it is the end of a decade. We are about to embark in the world of the 1620s and see what changes, innovations. We've only got one more Munday text, I think, left to go a little further down the line. We will have a lot more Middleton coming along, so we're going to get more, but also other writers and artificers, for that matter, coming further along. Any final thoughts from the room before I close the session? Eric and then Rachel.
I'm just wondering if there are like references to previous pageants, and characters and stuff, because like for example, he does talk about what Middleton talks about, like, you know, zeal to right wrongs, and we know that zeal appeared in a previous pageant, you know, firing pyrotechnics out of his head, and sort of the whole love character who is betrothed to the Lord Mayor, who was single, whose name I can't recall, was also kind of another pageant. So I don't know if there's also like a reference to previous pageants as well, assuming that people would have been there to see them.
It does seem that there are ongoing conventions and maybe ongoing, you know, obviously selection of animals and, you know, and materials. So yeah, callbacks, you know, relatively, maybe there's a very popular thing or popular references. They do tend to be formulaic in that sense, but there's a lot of people doing the same sort of function, even if they're given different names or slightly different spin as well. So you have very similar figures, even if they're labelled in a slightly different way.
This is the very first Skinner's show that survives in print since the 1585 one, the one we started with. So it's kind of hard to sort of draw parallels that directly, really. They didn't have that many Lord Mayors.
And we've got one previous Ironmongers, which we've done as well, 1609. So, you know, maybe there is a slight comparison, but I think it's more the overall event itself slightly talks to itself, just simply because of the nature of the event. Even if it is different, it's also sort of the same. Rachel?
Nope. I withdraw.
You withdraw. That's fine. That's fine. We're allowed not to have thoughts. If that is absolutely fine. If there is nothing more from the room, that's it for the 16 tenties. We are now ploughing into the 1620s and further down the line, hopefully the 1630s, and then we run out. Basically, we run out of the limits of our project, but also we run out of Lord Mayor's shows in this incarnation. So yes, many more sessions yet to go. Thanks to all the wonderful readers in the room for all their wonderful reading and their thoughts, and hope to see you all again soon. Goodbye.